Good morning and welcome to Rising. We hope everyone had a great MLK Day and a long weekend for those of you who had off. Brianna, how was your mini vacation?
It was great. I spent much of it reading the colorful tweets about the new commemorative MLK statue that was unveiled in Boston.
We are going to talk about that later in the show. I can't wait.
I cannot
also,
wait.
We had to rush through the show today so I can watch the next trailer for the next season of The Mandalorian, which I'm very excited for.
Oh, I didn't even know about that.
Just dropped. We can watch it as soon as we finish the show.
Okay, look forward to that as well.
All right, what's going on?
Well, we obviously have a lot to talk about. Teddy Schleifer will be here to tell us about Sam Bankman-Fried's lonely life in Palo Alto and any new details on that particular saga. Robbie and I will also give you an update on the Idaho murders case. But first, we have some friends joining us today at the top of the show. Former Special Assistant to President Biden and former Press Secretary to First Lady Jill Biden, Michael LaRosa, is here with us, as well as the founder of the Red Renaissance PAC and radio talk show host, Kimberly Klacik. Welcome to you both.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, guys. So all anyone is talking about right now is President Biden's classified documents scandal after Republican lawmakers called for visitor logs of Biden's Delaware home, where a second batch of classified documents were found. The White House counsel's office released a statement yesterday saying that there were no logs. Quote, like every president across decades of modern history, his personal residence is personal. Biden is currently facing a special counsel investigation into his handling of classified documents. Michael, let's start with you. How do you think they're handling this appropriately? I gather that Biden is probably frustrated at this. I know he wanted to announce his likely bid for a second term, and this is taking the oxygen out of that. How should they handle it?
Sure. So I think right now the North Star, according to what I'm watching, what everybody's watching, and the way they're handling this is that their North Star is the law, right? And sometimes the law, following the law, is not always convenient to the public relations strategy. But the legal strategy is what is driving the comp strategy. And sometimes it's just, like I said, just not convenient for one another. Would they love, James Carville said something back in '92, speed kills, get it all out fast, take some short-term pains for a long-term gain. It doesn't seem like the communications shop is able to do that, not because they don't want to, but because their legal strategy is driving the comp strategy, meaning the lawyers are saying, we're following the law, and the law means turn it over as soon as you find it.
Well, Kimberly, what do you make of this? Because obviously the hypocrisy, as it were, stems from the fact that Donald Trump is in the situation, and when Donald Trump had these outstanding documents, the narrative from the liberal media and politicos was all about how this was deeply irresponsible. Biden says, how could anybody ever do this? This is a national security issue. And there was what some perceived at the time to be some degree of hyperbole. Now that the shoe is on the other foot, do you accept the rationale that there are meaningful differences between what has happened with Joe Biden and what happened with Donald Trump last year?
Well, I think we're at this point where you're right. It is very hypocritical, right? We're now playing by the Democrats' rules. When Mar-a-Lago was raided and we were told that there were classified documents there, everybody got very upset about it. You had many Democrats, even on Capitol Hill, saying that this has to be done in an expeditious way, and we got to figure out what's there, and he's got to cooperate and all this other stuff. And that was a full-on raid. When it comes to President Biden, apparently they knew about the classified documents prior to the midterm elections. It happened on November 2nd. So I have many questions on who knew what and when. And so, if this is election interference, I think that's another piece of this that people are not talking about. We also found out that there were more documents found on December 20th. Now, that second batch of documents, that should have been revealed when we found out about everything in the public here in January. But it was a slow drip and a slow rollout. And, the one thing about Mar-a-Lago is there is a record of everyone that comes to that residence. I've been there multiple times. You have to tell them who you are. They do background checks. Yes, Wilmington, Delaware, that is Biden's personal residence. And I don't expect him to have a log of the people that visit him at his home. But those are the differences.
What would you say to that?
Mar-a-Lago is a country club, right? It's a business. Trump Tower is an apartment complex. It's a business. His house in Bedminster, there's no logs there. There's no logs at Rehoboth. There's no logs in Wilmington. There's logs at Camp David. There are logs at the White House. They're very different. In terms of election interference.
Yeah, I think that's, what about the fact that the documents were apparently found right before the election? I think that's probably the biggest issue here from unfair treatment versus the Trump situation.
Well, the reason why it seems that way is because one president's response was to fight and not turn over the documents for over a year. That's why there was a raid. There's no raid in Greenville because they keep saying, take them. We don't want them. We found them. We don't want them. There is a model way to respond to a discovery of classified information. And the Biden team is doing it by the law. The other president has been known to not really care much about following the law. If he did, he would have turned them over, but he thinks they're his. So for a year, he defied a subpoena, he defied DOJ, he defied the archives, and he was raided.
Yeah, Kimberly, how would you respond to that? Because I think that's probably a fair point, from the other side. The reason there's been no raid of Biden properties is because the documents were given back or attempted to give back. Trump held onto the documents, was combative with the agencies that wanted them, and that's the reason there was a raid. Now, you can still say how the raid was carried out was, was not necessarily how it was done. I think it's probably characteristic of these kinds of raids in general, which I have all sorts of criticisms of. But that's why it's different. That's why there was no raid of Biden's, properties.
Yeah, I respectfully disagree with that notion. Look, President Trump was the president when he had those documents, and he had the ability to declassify. He thought that they were, rightfully, his to take with him. Look, if you want some documents from Mar-a-Lago, I think, you go and pick them up. You don't wait for him to send them to you. The difference, again, is that President Biden, even if he was forthcoming, think about it. These documents were unsecured in his garage next to his Corvette, right? I mean, they should have went immediately and started searching his properties to find out there were more classified documents, and they didn't do that, right? They found one batch on November 2nd, another batch on December 20th, and then we learned more just this past weekend here in January. And so, yes, he might be cooperative, but why didn't the DOJ say, you know what? There's a lot of classified evidence here. Maybe we should go and take a look for ourselves. I'm not saying you have to do it in a raid type of manner, but you should go and send some agents out there to collect any more information that could put us at national security risk.
Kimberly, you point out that Trump was the president and he had the ability to declassify documents, but many people have made the point that the ability to declassify documents is not the same thing as actually declassifying documents. And there was a lot of pushback from liberals around the idea that Donald Trump seemed to be implying that if he just thought about declassifying the documents or waved his hands over the paper in kind of like a magical spell sort of way, that would have the effect that he wanted, as though his mens rea would attach to whatever documents have to be in his possession. Do you think at a certain point there has to be some responsibility that conservatives have and say, look, the raid would not have happened if Donald Trump, frankly, had just been more cooperative with the investigation in a way that is meaningfully different than what's going on with Joe Biden?
Look, I think we're not even privy to all the information, to be honest with you. And that's when it comes to President Trump and President Biden. We don't know how forthcoming President Biden was. We don't know how forthcoming President Trump was. And just the opposite, right? We're basing this off of media rumors and innuendos. And so we don't exactly know what happened. But what we do know is that these documents were found on President Biden's property prior to the midterm elections. Somebody sat on it, and I want to know who sat on it. And if it was somebody in the DOJ and higher up close to Merrick Garland or him himself, I think that person should resign. Because again, that information should have been public as soon as those classified documents were discovered.
Was the Trump information immediately public?
No, it wasn't. He had the DOJ, the archives were fighting with him, subpoenaing him, arguing with them and his lawyers for over a year.
And that wasn't, the press wasn't privy to that. We weren't privy to that until the raid.
That's not how the law works. That's not how DOJ conducts investigations. The investigations are not conducted in the press for the same reason why the Trump DOJ under Bill Barr, we didn't know during the election that Hunter Biden was already under federal investigation. He's been under federal investigation since 2018. That's not how they conduct legal investigations in our country.
Conservative might say that that's another example of liberal bias, and that when liberals are being investigated, it's quiet. When Trump, it's a raid.
He was being investigated by the Trump administration, by a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney in Delaware. And everybody in Trump's DOJ, at least Bill Barr at least, knew about it.
Well, speaking of President Trump, he weighed in on the new revelations over the weekend, writing, quote, "The White House just announced that there are no logs or information of any kind on visitors to the Wilmington house and flimsy, unlocked, and unsecured, but now very famous garage. Maybe they are smarter than we think. This is one of seemingly many places where highly classified documents are stored in a big pile on the damp floor. Mar-a-Lago is a highly secured facility with security cameras all over the place and watched over by staff and our great Secret Service. I have info on everyone." And while members of the president's party have largely downplayed the severity of the mishandled documents, Representative Ilhan Omar told MSNBC last week, quote, "I'm glad there is a special prosecutor that's been appointed to investigate this, because anytime there is a deviance in regards to security protocol, that should be taken seriously. It should be investigated." Kimberly, you said you visited Mar-a-Lago. What do you think Trump meant there by "I have records on everyone, I have files of everyone"? What did he mean by that?
Yeah, so to actually get onto the property at Mar-a-Lago, you have to submit your social security number and so much information prior to the date that you're supposed to arrive. So they do. He has information on absolutely everyone that comes to that property, and he is correct in that. But again, I will say, I don't expect Biden to have information on people that come to his personal residence in Wilmington. I don't think that's fair to say that, right? I don't keep documents on people that visit me at my house. But I will say also that, earlier I think Michael was talking about this is not how DOJ does investigations, being in the public. I mean, the Russian collusion hoax, January 6th committee, all of this is being done with the public eyes watching, and we still haven't gotten to the bottom of this, this so-called crime that President Trump supposedly committed. And so, this is how they do investigations. They do them very publicly when they want to fit a certain narrative. And again, Republicans are attacked in a public, violent way, and liberals do not have, what we have coming at us.
That's just not true. Robert Mueller conducted his investigation in private, in secret, and he delivered a report to Congress and testified about it. That's how we knew about what was being investigated during Russian collusion.
What would you say? I guess there seems to be a lot more leaking and press involvement when it's a Republican scandal, and a lot more it's behind closed doors when it's a Democrat.
Was there leaking with respect to the Donald Trump document scandal?
In general, I think that's what Kimberly was
Now, I know I'm a little bit older than you, but
we covered that as we started. You were referencing political events I've never heard of.
As somebody who's inspired to go into politics by Bill Clinton and watched the 90s very closely, I encourage you to go back and read more about the Ken Starr investigation into Whitewater, into Monica, into
certainly for that time period. But that was, as you said, that was a long time ago.
There was a lot of leaking.
No, fair enough.
Well, a final question for you, Kimberly. Do you give Ilhan Omar some credit here for seemingly being pretty even-handed about this? Are you surprised that she said, yeah, there should be investigation, there should be transparency? Is that a point for the left flank of the Democratic Party, being even-handed with respect to Joe Biden?
No, I think she's making a comment that many people are making. I mean, I read the entire comments that she made, the entire interview that she had, and she's basically saying, look, President Biden's cooperating, President Trump is a criminal. She's still saying those things. I don't respect a lot of what she has to say. But again, a lot of this for me personally comes back to the fact that the documents were found before the midterm elections, and I want to know exactly who sat on them and decided not to reveal it.
Well,
all right, last word, Michael.
The good news is we have two special prosecutors who are going to lay out exactly what took place, the right approach and the wrong approach. Both prosecutors worked for President Trump.
All right. Well, Michael LaRosa, Kimberly Klacik, thank you both for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And next up, podcast giant Joe Rogan believes Biden's own team is trying to get rid of him before 2024 by uncovering mishandled classified documents. We'll give you our takes on that when Rising returns. Stay with us.